Hi, I am talking to Michael Harper, the very artsy-looking Michael Harper, because he is in France and their reception is a little bit strange today. So, yes, you can see him. He looks a little bit like a portrait, and that's not a bad thing, right? You're just a work of art. It's a lovely thing. So, let me read a little bit of your bio. Michael Harper teaches throughout Europe and the United States. He's given workshops, lectures, and master classes for the Center for Performance Research at, okay, I can pronounce French, but Aberystwyth?
Aberystwyth, University of Aberystwyth.
Thank you. The Asolo Song Festival in Italy, the Bristol Alexander School, the Sage Gateshead, Unicorn Natural Voice Camp, British Library, Marlborough College, etc., Westminster Choir College on this side of the pond. He has studios in London, Oslo, and Bristol. And he's also the director of his own arts organization, the Lodge Farm Project in Norfolk. And he's acted as associate artistic director and course master for the Pegasus Opera Company. He also has worked with the Youth Music and Sing Up and co-creative director of Sing for Water London at the Mayor's Thames Festival, and that's been going on for 15 years. He's also curated recitals for the London Song Festival, Steinway Hall in London, St. John Smith Square in London. He's also done some conducting or directing like Johnny Skiki and other operas. And well, I guess I'll stop there and just fill in some things. You've worked with such people as Simon Callow and Helen Chadwick, and you've been living in the UK for a number of years, having been born and brought up in Virginia. And can we talk a little bit about your growing up in Virginia? Because part of the reason I wanted to talk to you was to give some background on your extraordinary childhood, which was the result of one of your teachers. Can you tell me a little bit about Helen? You tell me.
Well, my teacher, Helen Palmer Howard,
Yeah.
was an extraordinary lady. She was my teacher in the 4th grade, and she was about education for children. Didn't matter where you came from or who you were. If you were a child, she was going to make sure you got educated. And I remember going with her after school because I used to hang around with her all the time. I don't know why, but I used to hang around with her. Maybe when a child gets a sense that they have an ally, they stick with them. And she was an ally to me until the day she died. And so she used to go to kids' homes where they had coal burning in the fires, because that was quite unusual in those days, unless you were really impoverished. And we would go and she would sit there, and they obviously didn't have running water in these houses, in some of these houses, and she would sit there in her very fine clothes and talk to the parents, because if the parents didn't come to talk to her, she would go and talk to them. Because a lot of these parents were dealing with the issues of poverty, and they didn't have time to think about their child's education. And so I think that was a quite challenging situation for her, but she went straight ahead into it. And then when I was, so at school, she would take us to, on field trips all the time. So we went to Washington, and we went to the usual things, the monument and the Capitol and all of those things. But the most important thing for me is that we went to Frederick Douglass's house, the great abolitionist. And she had also arranged that we meet Frederick Douglass's great-granddaughter, I believe it was. This really lovely woman, and she came out and greeted us and talked to us. And, that it was about making those really important connections for us as children, not just about history, but about our history as Black people in the States as well. And there were, we had a mixed class, but she wanted us all to know that this history was not just one-sided. And in America, whether you like it or not, no matter what culture you come from, you're Black or white. That's the major agenda. And everyone else gets sort of sidelined. It's not that other people don't have oppressions, but in America, in the United States, people, I'll say, because you're from Canada, and Jamaica, which is all America as well.
Mhm.
But people get other people's oppressions get sidelined because the legal code is about black and white in America, and you sort of have to choose which side. I was thinking about that this morning when I watched your podcast, your webcast with Thomas Hampson and Louise Toppin and what's the other
Bill
guy?
Banfield
Bill
and
Banfield and
Mark Clegg.
Mark Clegg.
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas Hampson kept saying, "But this is America, but this is America." And I'm like, dude, yes, this is America. What we're telling you is America. And I kept wondering, is that a rhetorical device on his part to stimulate conversation, or does he really believe that there's this egalitarian meritocracy that we live in?
I suspect the former.
I think so as well, because he's a very clever guy, and he's very committed to this cause of I use this expression as well, but exploding the canon.
Mm-hmm.
And I was about to write a paper on that, exploding the canon, because I think so anyway, so getting back to Helen, she heard me sing as a kid in class. Sorry, let me move this camera. I'm just like trying to figure out where I am.
Yeah, it's a weird experience.
Yes, because it's all a bit backwards. And she heard me sing, and she decided that I was going to sing for all of the 4th and 5th graders. So that was the whole school in my elementary school. So I was going to sing for all of the 4th and 5th graders, because we were quite a big class, my class, when we were graduated. And so I did this, and I sang "You'll Never Walk Alone" in front of all of these people in this school.
Wow.
And I thought, oh, well, this is okay. I was really shy. I mean, I know that you find that hard to believe now.
I do.
I was really shy as a child. And so she got me to sing, and then she never let go of that. You know, she was pushing me forward to do it all the time. She introduced me to people when I was little, like Undine Smith Moore, the great composer who taught at Virginia State, which is in Ettrick, just next to my hometown. To Dr. Cole Harris, who used to teach at Virginia State, who was a great pianist and organist, who played my first recital for me and coached me during my first recital. And she taught us in class about the visibles and the invisibles. So that was our history lesson. So she had on one side of above the board these pictures of white men, mostly, and their historical contributions, or their supposed historical contributions, because we know that a lot of that was not necessarily made up, but they received the credit for a lot of other people who did some of the work. And then on the other side, she had people of color, mostly black men and women, who had made contributions as well. So we would have George Washington, but we would have Crispus Attucks on the other side, the first person who died in the Revolutionary War. We'd have Benjamin Banneker. And then we'd have Thomas Jefferson, and maybe he was earlier, but maybe someone like Sojourner Truth or Harriet Tubman, who were much later. Frederick Douglass, Lincoln on one side, Frederick Douglass on the other side. And then, you know, inventors as well, like Garrett Morgan, who made the sort of stoplight that we're used to seeing, made the model for that. And George Washington Carver, who did so many things with peanuts that we still use today. And some say that the idea of the what's the line, the for making cars, the
assembly line
came from him. So who knows? But she definitely taught us that we had something to be proud of, because in Virginia there was no history about us. It was just, you were slaves, and that's all the mention that you got in the history books.
Yeah.
That was
Now,
it.
what year was, you said fourth grade, if you don't mind dating yourself?
Well, I don't mind dating myself.
Yeah, it's all good.
I'm going to be 60 in 3 years, and I don't really care that I'm
It's
going to
all
be
good.
60 in 3 years. Yes. So
Amen.
this
Amen.
was in 1972, I believe. Yes,
Yeah.
1972. I was 9,
Okay.
and and I'd sung in church and all of those sort of things, but Helen was a different sort of creature. And she also took us to television studios to talk with television presenters about our political ideas. And, she would,
About your political ideas as
yeah,
9-year-olds. That's
listen,
awesome.
Maria, when you're black in the South
Yeah.
and you're intelligent, you cannot escape being political.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, a lot of people wouldn't have thought that 9-year-old political, that their ideas were
Yeah,
important. So
yeah,
I just think that's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah,
Oh no, she
absolutely.
was wonderful. She thought that children were people and had minds, and
What do you know?
that's what she thought. Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we most people in those days didn't think that. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe teachers did really, but still there was that old-fashioned idea
Hmm.
that children were seen and not heard,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of that, and you did what you were told. And
Hmm.
she asked, in some ways, what you'd like to do,
Hmm.
and she guided you to be able to do those things.
Hmm.
So she was an extraordinary woman. And
Hmm.
she also got me involved in the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And she said colored people were all people, which was a
Okay.
wonderful, wonderful thing.
Wow.
And and we went around to all of these. To me, I mean, I lived in Petersburg, which my best friend said, you live in the country, it isn't the country. In the 19th century, it was a very important industrial city.
Hmm.
And a lot of, big things happened there.
Hmm.
Some of the first Black churches in the United States are there. The first independent Black community is there. There were a lot of Civil War things that happened there as well.
Hmm.
And so it was a very important town. And so anyway, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I've heard that she would take you to all kinds of places, like
Oh
way
yes,
out in the
yeah.
country,
So yeah,
and
so that's right. She took me to places, Pulaski, Virginia, which is in the southwestern part of Virginia, past Roanoke, and we would go there, and there was an issue in all of these places of people not having rights, not having provisions for education, not having provisions for libraries, as you read about with Samuel Tucker. And this was in the
yeah,
70s. In the 70s, there
yeah.
were still sort of separate but equal provisions.
Hmm.
And and she would go there to set up youth councils to get young people to start thinking about civil rights.
Hmm.
And we would have meetings. I don't know if it was every Thursday, but it was quite regularly that we would have meetings. And and the thing is, I wasn't the only one whose life was affected by her. She affected so many young and powerful people, Black and white and all colors. And she dared to challenge the establishment. And I thought some of these places we were riding late at night on Sunday night after being out for the weekend, visiting these places and setting up youth councils and counseling these people, they were dangerous places for Black people to be. They
Hmm.
were dangerous. I mean, you see that the Ku Klux Klan has never gone away. It
Right.
was still very much in existence in Virginia. It was just they weren't wearing the sheets in public anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So, these were, and she would just ride through there fearlessly with me in the car, half asleep. I would say, I'll stay awake to keep you company. I never could. But, she then at 16, I was singing for Samuel W. Tucker,
Hmm.
who was instrumental in one of the big cases in Virginia to be rolled into Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. And this was in Prince Edward County, Farmville, Virginia, where they closed all of the schools, and so the Black children had nowhere to go to school for 5 years, and they gave
5 years.
5 years, and they gave the white children vouchers to go to private academies, and so some people had to send their children away. Some Black people had to send their children away, far away to relatives, so that they could go to school, because many of them couldn't afford to. For 5 years, they called to close the schools.
What and under what premise? I mean, not that they felt they needed one, but what was the premise? Rather than integrate, in other words.
Rather than integrate. And I think the idea, and you hear this still now, and Black people who are in the know this as dog whistle politics. It was a choice, freedom of choice.
Yeah.
You know, freedom of choice became one of the arguments that's still used now. But that case got rolled into, it was the law firm Hill, Tucker and Marsh, and they were all very, very important Black men in the community. So when I was 16, Helen had taken me to visit the Tuckers before, Samuel Tucker and his wife Julia, and they were just lovely, genteel people, really, really nice to me. And when I was 16, there was an honorary service for all of the service he had given to civil rights in the community and his law practice, and I sang for it. And one of his army buddies, I think he was in the army buddies, Colonel somebody whose name I can't remember, I wish I could, but he said to me, "Young man, if you can sing like that unaccompanied, you should be taking singing lessons." So he organized for me to go to Washington, D.C. to have singing lessons with this woman called Margaret Massey. I think she taught at Catholic University. The other person he was thinking of was Todd Duncan. I was thinking, if I studied with Todd Duncan, where would I be now? You know, but you know, I am where I am.
Exactly.
And yeah, and so it was really wonderful. And then Helen took me to Washington, D.C. Once a month, and we'd stay for the weekend. We'd stay with my aunt and uncle. And we'd go to this woman's house just over the border in Maryland and have my lessons on Saturday and then on Sunday. And
for how many years did she do this? Because when you first told me about her, I just assumed she was a single woman, but she had a husband and two kids.
No. Yeah, so
a very, very supportive husband and lovely.
Yes, indeed he was.
Indeed
he was. We used to have the meetings in the house. He was a sheet metaler and roofer, and he's a lovely man, and their son, they lived in this lovely sort of shingled house, and their son was an artist and became a fashion designer, and he had done really beautiful things, sort of Mondrian-esque things in the ceiling in their house, painting squares, and it was really, really lovely. I guess he and his father had done it. And then their daughter they adopted, Juia, which is short for Sacagawea, because Helen had Native American heritage. And Mr. Howard, I think, was from a family, gosh, were there 18 children? That might be an exaggeration, but there were a lot of them.
Yeah,
I might have doubled the number.
I mean, before birth control, my mom, the area in Bermuda, she said there were families with 13, 14 kids because there was not birth control. So
so I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating, but I think he was the youngest. Wow. And he still had sisters who were living, you know, I think one of the sisters may have passed 100 or something like that.
Wow.
And so Helen had, you know, she had a family and kids, but she was out there in the community. And not only was she challenging the white establishment, but she also challenged the Black establishment and its, you know, snootiness, because sometimes that could get in the way of young people who weren't from that background moving ahead. And she challenged that, and people didn't like it all the time, but she didn't care. She was for telling the truth, and I think it really irritated people sometimes. And I like that about her, because I think I'm like that myself a little bit.
You try to be. I mean, well, the thing that initially I was thinking, wow, someone should make a movie about her. I mean, there's so many of these unsung heroes, and I
Mm,
guess they continue to exist, and hopefully, that will get us through this current
mm,
situation. I mean,
mm.
as you're talking about closing the schools, it's not closing the schools, but I heard that almost all, or 95%, or some ridiculous number of the precincts for voting in Kentucky were shut down.
Yeah.
And ever since they got rid of that, the Voting Rights Act, that this voter suppression thing has taken off full steam ahead, and one wonders what you can do other than find people with vehicles to take people where they need to go, and
Yeah.
and
I
organize in
mean,
that regard. But
yeah. I mean, it's extraordinary what we're going through now in the States. And I'm not at all surprised by it,
mm-hmm,
because I knew that this stuff still existed. And, since Nixon started to court the Southern racist vote,
mm-hmm,
um, they've been leaking from the Democrats over to the Republicans. And one of my friends, who was kind of a mentor to me, so I was a bit upset when he said this to me, but when I came back to the States, and I met him in a bar where he was working, and he said to me that Johnson had disappointed and angered a lot of Southerners by passing the civil rights legislation.
mm-hmm.
And I just stopped, and I thought, I mean, this guy had been nice to me. I knew that he was from the South, and so
Oh, you mean
therefore,
he was disappointed by it?
well, he said that it disappointed a lot of white Southerners,
Well, he wasn't
meaning
including
that
himself, I hope.
well, I wasn't sure, but I never saw him again from that, because I said, well, what was he meant to do? And then we had some discussion about it, and I had
Mm,
the sense that he thought that Johnson shouldn't have passed the civil rights legislation. So I
mm.
thought, well, this is not somebody I want to talk to anymore, because I don't need, because I'm at this point in my life where I don't need to have those conversations anymore with people. I
Yeah.
don't need to discuss the minute details of why we should have an equitable society.
Mm-hmm,
I'm not talking about an equal society, because people come with different abilities,
mm-hmm,
but talking about an equitable society
mm-hmm,
where everybody who has the possibility has a chance to fulfill that possibility.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's the society that America touts. That's the society that America advertises on all of its stations and all of its movies and everything, except you don't see enough of us. You, it advertises all of these things, and
Mm-hmm,
I'm not interested in discussing anymore with anybody
mm-hmm,
about what our contribution was and what our contribution is and how deserving or not deserving it is.
mm-hmm,
We are deserving, and we are able, and we
mm-hmm,
have continued to do despite all of the obstruction.
mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, you know what? I'm too old for this. Bye.
Yeah,
So I'm not
yeah.
interested in having those conversations.
Mm-hmm,
Other people might be interested. Someone sent me a petition the other day, a friend of mine, and this guy, this young African American guy with an African name. So I'm imagining maybe he's a recent immigrant, or his parents are. I mean, his English was impeccable, non-accented. It doesn't
mm-hmm.
mean that an accented English is not impeccable, but I mean, it was very
It
American.
sounded like he'd lived here a while.
It's a very American. It sounded indigenous,
Mm-hmm,
and and his petition was very beautiful. It was like, you'll be one of the people to raise your hand if you see racism and misogyny and sexism, blah blah blah, and that you'll be one of the people to be counted to work for a peaceful world. All of the things I believe in. But I said to my friend, you know what? I'm really mad right now. And I'm not really ready to let go of my rage, because I just found it. And I said,
mm-hmm,
I encourage you to hold on to your rage. And I said, personally, I think this guy is a little bit naive if he thinks this is the way forward.
Mm.
Because I think we need to be mad right now.
Mm.
We need to be mad right now. We need to show, because one of the things that is taken away from us as intelligent or intelligent Black people, intellectuals, is that you must not be mad. You must not show your rage, because if you show it, unless you that's your academic route, for instance, unless that's your academic route, if you show it, then you're considered an angry Black person and unworthy and ungrateful and all of those things. And I think that it's time for us to show that this is not okay. Trump is not okay. The way that America has gone is not okay. People putting up signs about wanting to have a white America again and who are running for office. This is not okay. They do not own America. We built that country. We built that country. And I'm sorry, it is not acceptable the way that it's going. And so I think that I am a peace-loving person. If you come to my house and you ask for some water, or you ask for a cup of tea, or you ask for something to eat, I will give it to you and I will be kind to you. But don't come with no mess. Don't come with no mess. And I think these people have come to my house with some mess.
Well, I've never seen this, but you know, in the moment, everybody is suddenly like, oh, things have been bad for Black people, and oh, here's this little bit of history that we never knew, and oh wow, wasn't this horrible? Like I don't know if you saw on my page, but the Gators, the Florida Gators, did you see that story about why the Florida Gators are no longer having their fight? I don't know, you know, like you go in a football game or whatever and they chant whatever and it's Gator bait. And so there was this history, which I couldn't even finish the article, about using Black babies as bait for alligators so people could shoot them for their hides, like putting children who couldn't walk near the water. And then, you know, as they're crying and trying to escape, then they would wait for the alligators to come out. They wouldn't necessarily be concerned about saving, you know, it wasn't like they'd pull them out at the last minute. And they had other things where in, you know, in a zoo, they would advertise this as a form of entertainment, that they would put some little Black child in the thing with the alligators and things like that. So these are stories that, you know, kind of go against the image that people like to have of this rosy past, that to which they say they want to return to our founding values and all these sorts of things. And when I hear that, yeah, that makes me mad too, because I'm thinking, I mean, what are these values? I mean, when it was actually founded, what was going on? And so you're inviting me to return to that, you know, as I posted on, you know, one of these threads, I'm like, I'm a woman, first of all, you know, I'm a Black woman. I don't want to go back there. But do you think
you see, that's a rational argument, Maria. These people are not rational. They're not rational. These people who say they believe in God, now you do, I'm of a different sort, but these people who say that they believe in God and praise him to the highest and put on this fundamentalist show in public, and then go and vote for a man like this in office who doesn't even know what the Bible is or which direction to turn it in. And you know, I'm sorry, you know, I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of the lies. And I grew up with them. And, you know, this has caused me a lot of distress. It's not that I ever believed that it was all lovely and good. But when you paint this picture and all of these statues in the South that people are talking about, I remember the last time I went to Virginia, I went to the Shirley Plantation because I'd never been to a plantation before. And I wanted to show my partner there. So we went there and we were walking around. And I was asking questions, all sorts of questions, and when we went for a tour of the house. And I just love it because, you know, when you're Black in the States, there's a kind of invisibility as well as a visibility. And there's a kind of expectation that you won't necessarily be bright. And so I loved asking questions at this place, and I could see the tour guide, you know, who's probably from that part of Virginia, she was a little bit sort of disconcerted by my, continuous questions. I was just interested in the house and, how people, I wasn't even asking any controversial questions about how many slaves did they have to
we did.
wash their
we went to New Orleans and we visited. There were two plantations. The one was just like about the beautiful house, and they called them the helpers or workers or something. And then the other one did at least make some nod to people being enslaved and talked about that in some way. But the first one, I mean, and we were these, I mean, all female, but was it 4 or 5 of us, but very tall and articulate Black women asking all kinds of uncomfortable questions with not very friendly looks on our faces. I'm sure they were happy when we left. But that's the thing. But I'm saying, if you're going to do a plantation tour, you can't just say this is a beautiful house. I mean, you can't just pretend that it was all just like lovely decorating and gracious, whatever. I mean, like, get real. So maybe I'm wondering, as suddenly there's this thing of all these companies putting out statements and saying, yeah, oh, whoa, Black lives do matter. Whoa, what happened here? Oh, yes, Black lives do matter. I'm sort of wondering how long this particular shift will last, or if it is a real shift. I'm hoping it's a shift. People are saying it feels a little different. We'll see. I mean, all these books that people are reading, and I've been talking about this with pretty much everybody I've talked to in some way as to, do you think that this is a tipping point, or do you think that it's just like an acute focus that will then shift backwards? I mean, there've been so many articles and things, and people trying to give a little bit more information to those who really honestly did not know. Perhaps for whatever reason, they just had no idea. What do you think?
Well,
or do you want to wait and see? Like, you don't really have a clear. I mean, it's hard to predict the future. I don't know. What do you think?
I've been through too many iterations of equality movements in the U.S. I've been through and it's not that we haven't moved on. We certainly have moved on. But to find ourselves back at the turn of the last century, where we have moved on, as Louise Toppin said in your web chat, she said, we thought we had overcome, not we shall overcome, but we have overcome. And I think I never thought that we have overcome, but I certainly thought that some things had moved forward. And to be back here with this person in the office, and I always, when I write about him, I always put parentheses, P, small p, parentheses, resident, because he does not at all deserve the capital letter or the first letter of that word at all. It's not that there haven't been bad ones in the past. There certainly have. But this is the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime. And what it does is embolden all of those people that we thought were suppressed by the general tenor of things in the States, the general tenor of equality and movement forward and getting together, even though we saw the police killing people all over the place. I'm sorry, we're supposed to be talking about beauty, aren't we? Because I can tell you all of the beautiful things that I like.
See, I did the podcast Finding Beauty. I haven't really been getting to my beauty questions. So I guess, there was an intro that was introducing it as Finding Beauty, and an outro, and I haven't been doing that. So this is just random conversation. Okay. But if you want to talk about beauty, we can talk about beauty. I tell you what, let's go into your journey as a countertenor, because I want to play that little clip of you singing.
Okay.
And so Helen, I'm so slow.
Palmer Howard.
Okay, got part of it.
So she would always write it Helen P. Howard, because she was so proud of where she came from. And I think as a Black person, or I should say an African American.
Honestly, I'm not. I mean, there are a lot of people.
I'm not that bothered.
Yeah, I don't. Anyway, that's another subject. But yeah, go ahead.
So as a Black person, you you had very little sort of information about where you came from unless people told you.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't the documents that you knew about. I mean, we now know that there's some county court documents, you know how to find the information. But people oftentimes put their middle name. They put an initial for their middle name. You'll see that a lot, like with some, what is it, Charles something? He's one of the actors in Hollywood, round-faced guy. But he's got his middle name. But a lot of Black people have their middle name there. But she was very proud of her father and her background she was from Goshen Gap, Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
which is near Stanton, which is spelled Staunton, but it's pronounced Stanton. And she was very proud of being from there.
Mm-hmm.
And she always wanted the P. And maybe it was kind of a feminist statement as well.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, she wanted her middle name, her last name remembered, that she wasn't just a married woman, because she was so much more than that. She was an activist. She was a liberator of children, you know. And I really think that she was a liberator of children from the very heavy loving upbringing of the South, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you understand me, you know. So yeah, so
you're meaning something that puts you in a particular box of making you respectable if you stayed in these small parameters, and she wanted you to think outside of that little box.
Yes, absolutely. And she, you know, I think that you had a way of being. It's not that people didn't encourage you to think, and there are some great thinkers from my community. I mean, you know, Blair Underwood comes from, he was in LA Law. I don't know if you know him. He's a
yes,
famous,
I do.
Famous actor. He's a good-looking guy, isn't he? Yes. Yeah, so Blair Underwood comes from my hometown. It's wonderful.
Okay. Yeah,
and we, we were in musical theater together in high school. He was very talented then.
Wait, you know Blair Underwood?
Oh, well, I did know him. I don't know him.
I know
now,
how that goes. Anyway, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
You know, he's still friends with a lot of people in Petersburg, but I don't live there and haven't been there for
I understand.
I go there to visit my family. Anyway,
moving on.
Anyway, we had another teacher there called Marie Manigault, and he talks about her in one of his video clips. And Marie Manigault was a brilliant Shakespeare teacher, a brilliant theater director, and she had a company called Playmakers of Virginia. And Playmakers of Virginia, she sustained for such a long time, making sure that Black theater and just theater in general got on the stage for Black people. And we did Pearly Victorious, which was based on the Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis play. That was a movie I told you about. I can't remember the name of the movie. Yeah. But it's brilliant because it's a satire, really, on the South and the sort of obsequies of the South.
Okay.
And we did The Amen Corner, where I played Brother Boxer, and we did A Raisin in the Sun, and you know, she did also. We did The Dark of the Moon. So we did a lot of different things with her. So that was another side of my education. So I went off to university at Virginia Commonwealth University, and my parents had wanted me to be an engineer because my cousin said, yeah, well, he should be an engineer. He has the aptitude for it. And I could do the maths and the science. And I had a guidance counselor called B. Mackenzie in high school. And she was from the old Black high school. And I had a white counselor as well. But she wasn't giving me any information about how to get in college. I had no information about it. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary when you think about it, how neglectful, willfully neglectful some of these teachers were. Not all of them were like that, because I had some wonderful teachers as well. But some of them were just willfully neglectful and didn't think that even if you were incredibly bright, you know, I was number 7 out of my out of 560 something students in my graduating class. So it's not like I was at the other end of the scale and would never make it into university. So B. Mackenzie said, take everything. She says, take everything that you possibly can, and then you'll be ready for whatever. She says, because you can do too many things. She says, take everything and you'll be ready for whatever whatever comes your way. And she was right, you know. So, and she'd been a counselor and a teacher when my mother was in school. So, so these people looked after you. The people, the Black people who came, so they looked after you. So I went on to university and I studied engineering for a year. My physics professor noticed that I'd done really well on an exam, but I hadn't done well on some of the other exams. And he said, you can do this when you want to, can't you? And I said, well, yes. And he says, but you don't want to, do you? And I said, no. And he said, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a singer, but my parents wanted me to study engineering. He says, well, then go be a singer. And maybe if he were thinking differently, he'd have said, no, we've got to keep this young Black man in here studying engineering to get this degree. We've got to retain him, which was the policy later, retention of students.
Yeah.
But I had lots of support in the music department. And one day my teacher, Dr. Ken Bowles, heard me singing. He was playing something with Joan Sutherland, and she was singing a cadenza at the end of her aria. And so I just started singing along with her. And he said, oh, that's pretty good. He said, how did you learn how to do this? Well, my brother and I used to sing. My brother, who was a singer, James, I used to sing, and we listened to Sarah Jordan Powell, who was kind of a gospel opera singer, and we would see who could sing the highest with her when we were young. And so that's how, and I sang in gospel choir and had always sang the top part as in the male quartets. So I think that's really how I discovered that voice, but I didn't engage with it really professionally until I was in graduate school in 1993, when they needed someone to sing Midsummer Night's Dream. And one of my coaches then, Donald Lowy, heard me sing and said, oh, you should go and sing for the opera department. They were looking for an oberon. Well, I mean, I'd been studying as a baritone. And I said, well, but I'm a baritone. Why should I care about that? And she said, oh, well, you should go and try it. So I went home and learned the aria over the summer and came back and sang the role in the autumn. I think it was in the autumn, maybe it's spring, I don't know.
Anyway,
so it was trial by fire.
Yeah. Okay, well, let me play a little bit of you singing, and you can tell me the context of this. Because this was a different time.
Okay.
If this works. And, oh, okay, I'll mention the pianist later.
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So that was helping. That was something you did at a radio station, or it was promoting a concert. Can you tell me more
That's
about the
right.
concert?
So it was for WGUC, and that was Sylvia Plyler, or Tibby Plyler, as we know her, from Cincinnati. And she still is one of my favorite people in the world, because Tibby gets it. She gets what's going on in the States. She gets just being human. And what's even more special is that she's from the South. She just gets it. And so when you were with Tibby, it was like with being with Helen. You were a student, a human being, and she was teaching you. She was bringing out of you what she knew was there. And that kind of makes me emotional, because there are teachers who teach, but there are teachers who teach. And that was Tibby. And she worked with people like Kathleen Battle and lots of other people who come. And a lot of people didn't appreciate Tibby's methods, because she made you slow down and learn how to learn. So when you left, you weren't depending on the teacher to fix you.
Yeah.
You could fix yourself. You could figure out a way. Didn't mean that you didn't need more teaching. It just meant that you had a process that wasn't about learning by rote or counting the numbers, but you had a process for integrating the music. And so Tibby played for me, and this was for a concert. I had come to England 2 summers before to study with a teacher, a countertenor here called Paul Eswood, who was one of the leading countertenors of his generation. Because there were teachers in the States, but the tradition was here. The tradition was here in England. I mean, I'm not here in England right now, I'm in France, but it was in England.
Yeah.
And the tradition was in England. And so I came here to study with him, and I got a Theodore Presser Foundation scholarship. And also my graduate school gave me an extra scholarship to study. So it was really great. And I went to Austria with my teacher that summer to do a week of study that he was doing there. And then I came back the next year on an English Speaking Union travel grant. And the next year I thought, well, I wanted to come and stay a little bit longer to study with my teacher, and I was going to the Britten Peers School for a course as well. So I decided to have a benefit concert for myself, basically. And my church sponsored the scholarship. And I asked people who had sung all over the world, or who were going to sing, or who are still singing all over the world, to come and sing for my concert. And they did so graciously. And we raised a really good sum to be my seed money for when I came to the UK, and so that I could stay here for a while. And I got a special visa to stay for a certain while, and then I got involved in an opera school, and just things. And I met my partner, and things just turned out that I stayed here. I stayed, and eventually got residency here and citizenship. I hadn't planned it to be that way, but this is how it happened. And I'm very happy with my life. I'm very happy with my life.
I was going to ask, would you ever, given, the situation, and the situation is what it is now. Can you ever imagine living in the States again? There is no utopia. As I find out more about Canada, Canada was like held up as the utopia. And as you know, I grew up there, and, not that I ever thought it was utopia, because I was called the N-word as a child in Western Canada. So, it's everywhere. But, and I know as I get the Guardian, I see, obviously Great Britain is not entirely great either. But I don't know. Can you imagine ever moving back to the States? You can say no. Well,
So I never like to say never, as
okay,
they always told me never say never. So I'm
right.
not going to say never.
I
When
said,
I
can
go
you
back,
imagine, not,
um,
that's just like in your own head, not
at,
knowing what the future
mm,
holds kind of thing.
at the moment, my life is is wonderful. I
Mhm.
really like my life. I'm doing what I want to do. I'm teaching singing at the Royal Northern College of Music, which is one of the best colleges, which is one of the best music colleges in this country.
Mhm.
I'm with a lot of other really fine singing teachers, with good students. I have private students that I love teaching. I teach sometimes students from the Norwegian Opera, and I have other students, both amateur and professional students that I love teaching.
Mhm.
I divide my time um, between the UK and France, and I travel around the world teaching, in other places. So I love my life.
Yeah.
And the pandemic has curtailed some of the traveling around,
Mhm.
um, and I hope that will change because I like the connection with people in a room.
Mhm.
I think there's something really special about that. Um, but to move back to the States, I would have to acclimatize to a different sort of environment. I'd have to acclimate, despite the fact that things are not great in Britain. The foundation of the country, though it is still the same construct as the US of
Mhm.
white being supreme,
Mhm.
um, it it's not the foundation of the country,
Mhm.
and therefore there's a little bit more room. And
Good.
I think also being American
Mhm.
here makes me a little bit outside of the outside of I can sit and look at the paradigm and think, oh yeah, you're trying to be racist, or you're trying to be difficult, or but you have to learn it. You have to learn what you're dealing with,
Mhm.
or you don't have to participate in it.
So the class structure, I mean, and all societies have
Yeah,
a stratification with
yeah,
class. I mean, I don't think there's a single one in on the earth. I could be wrong. Maybe I don't know every society, but the ones I'm familiar with. But I mean, I've never lived in the UK, so I don't know how
mm.
that works. But is that not a thing, or
Oh
you
yeah.
don't
I mean,
experience it
it's
much?
very strong there. There's certain. It's just like with racism in the States. I know every lift of the eyebrow. I know every lift of the eyebrow.
Mhm.
And when, someone tells me that's not racism, I'm going, okay,
Mhm.
you call it what you want.
Mhm.
But I think sometimes you have to investigate further, but it's something ain't right.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And so here, with the class thing, I can tell as well. But the thing is, I'm not bothered because most of the people who don't want to be with me, I don't want to be with them either. So that's absolutely fine with me. That is absolutely fine. And if people think because they have a certain amount of money or they have a certain pedigree that
Mhm.
makes them superior, I can just show them how it doesn't make them superior. So I'm not
Mm.
bothered by all of
Yeah.
that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, you can see in some of the leadership that we have that just because they have a certain education, a certain pedigree,
Mhm.
doesn't make them bright.
No, it doesn't make them accomplished. It doesn't make them knowledgeable,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
intelligence alone will not necessarily make you someone worthy of my respect, honestly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
Because you can still be a fool.
Yeah.
So, Maria, quite frankly, and that's the wonderful thing about being here and not being part of the paradigm.
Mm.
Even though you have your own place in it, you can sort of watch from the outside. And
Mm.
so I have that same privilege when I come back from the States because I know I don't have to stay there,
Mm.
that
Mhm.
I can watch from the outside. And it's not that I don't meet delightful people and that I don't have really good connections with people of all backgrounds in the States. I still do. And
Mhm.
I am grateful that because I have some wonderful, wonderful and supportive friends there and family. So that's not what I'm saying, but I'm not willing to subject myself to a Trump America. And even in Obama America, where people were openly racist to the man who deserved the capital P in president for all of his brains and for all that he did and has done. He deserves it. Okay, some people say he could have gone further, he could have done this, he could have. The man was there. That was like a big statement. The man was there. And he endured all of this stuff that we've been enduring for. He actually brought it out in the open. It was like, the lancing of a boil. He was.
Yeah.
He was the lancing of the boil of the pus of racism in America. He was the lancing of the boil. And he handled it with such grace and eloquence. He handled it with such grace and eloquence. He could have done a lot more. They could have done a lot more. But that's the trouble oftentimes with governments that are center left or further left. They're always a little bit afraid to do stuff. The thing that Lyndon Johnson had was that he was a Southerner. He was a Southerner and he could get away with it. And he was brash and a Southerner. So he could get away. He was like, I don't care. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I think, would I come back to the States and live? Life is so good here.
Yeah.
Life is so good here. And you don't know that it's always going to be good because there are a lot of strange people running the world right now. You don't know that it's always going to be good. So you can't ever say, I might say if it's not good here anymore, that I might want to come home, because I still call it home, though when I get there, it's this imaginary thing that's been in my head all this time while I'm away, and I get there and it's just left before I arrived. So,
it's never the same. I mean, that's what they say. You never can come home again because it's always wildly different when you get there.
It's never home. So I love so many things about it. And when I do come home to the States, I realize that everything I see on the news is not the States. So there's so many wonderful things that happen there. There's so many really lovely people there. There's so many people who are clued up. But people got to get a lot more clued up there. Because if they're just figuring out that we're experiencing what we're experiencing when we've been saying it all along, and you just get tired of saying it, so you don't say it anymore.
Well, that's what I saw a meme that said, or a sign that said, George Floyd's death wasn't a wake-up call. Like the alarm has been ringing for years. You just keep hitting the snooze button.
Wonderful.
That's a perfect sign.
It's wonderful. And Will Smith's thing that racism isn't, what is it? Racism hasn't increased. It's just being filmed or something like that.
Yeah, and that's true. That's true. Well, I mean, and the thing is, I when I did Finding Beauty, I would ask, how do you define beauty, and could art change the world? And on the one hand, I mean, all these things need to be discussed. They need to be talked about a lot. But on the other, I mean, I know I need to escape. Like, I can't carry this around in my head all day long, every day. I mean, it's in the background all day long, every day, but to just constantly engage, I mean, I have to go somewhere, and so, I mean, is that what you find as well, as far as art and just?
Well, I do think that art can change the world. I know that when I sing a spiritual, for instance, people cry sometimes. I know that when I come to my house here and I look at my garden and the big pond in my garden, and I am here at peace, I know that the environment that I have helped create here, and most of it was Mother Nature, but I put my stamp on it here. I bought the artwork. I know that listening to an orchestral thing, or listening to you play, or listening to other people play, makes a difference in my life. Listening to a gospel choir, or listening to Ella Fitzgerald or Sarah Vaughan, or many people, even some rock singers. I like Rod Stewart, because I think amazingly he's been going all this time and he can still sing.
Well, he had that scratchy voice to begin with.
But he's managed that scratchy voice, even if there's some vocal fault. He's managed that vocal fault, so he's still singing in his 70s.
Honestly, to me, I always said it's not just the quality of someone's voice, it's the passion. So
Exactly.
people don't have to be perfect in any way. They just have to
Exactly.
be passionate. And
Exactly.
I'm there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would rather hear mistakes and hear passion than to hear than to hear perfect.
Hmm.
I don't, perfection is completion.
Hmm.
And completion can be something, I tell students sometimes, okay, you sang that wrong note, own it. Now, if you go back and fix it, but
Hmm.
if it happens again, make something of it, make
Yeah.
an ornament.
Yeah.
If it's Baroque music, make an ornament of it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a saying I think I heard that if you do it once, it's a mistake. If you do it twice, it's jazz. Like you just, I believe I heard that. I'm sure I didn't make that one up. But well, listen, we've been talking for an hour. I didn't think it
Yeah.
would be a difficult thing to do. And I appreciate you giving me an hour of your time yet again, since I messed up the last one. And I'm sure I could easily fill another hour with you talking about other things. But well, so we may revisit this at some other later date. But anyway, thank you so much,
Well,
Michael,
thank you,
for your
Maria.
time.
I hope
Yeah.
I've said something that was worthwhile listening to, because I sometimes ramble at my age.
No,
I'm sure
at
my
your
students
age.
think the same thing.
Oh, I have every confidence that you rambled when you were younger, so no worries.
Probably, probably. So it's good that you can push a button and stop me.
I can. I'm about to do that right now.
Okay,
Anyway,
so
well, thank you, Michael.
we'll speak soon.
Okay.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Okay. Bye-bye.